everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here, and well, we'll start the show in a place that I gotta say I didn't really expect to begin today's discussion, which is with Kellen Mond. Yeah, that's right. I mean, and not in some sort of conversation about, hey, remember that guy played for the Minnesota Vikings, but somehow in a relevant tweet about the Minnesota Vikings' current quarterback situation. We'll get into it. And of course, your questions, comments, thoughts, feelings about where the Minnesota Vikings stand and the QB discussion will carry on. I've got a few updates on that, but there's also plenty of room to talk about just about anything here on a beautiful Thursday night that feels like spring is finally a little bit in the air. So why not? When spring is in the air, it's time for NFL rumors when we're done with NFL games and we haven't gotten quite to the part where we see NFL transactions. So let's just get right into it. Kellen Mond tweeted today, and Mond has been active recently on social media. He had a very long LinkedIn story. That's right, LinkedIn, about Mike Zimmer not too long ago. And it wasn't anything that you didn't already know about Kellen Mond and Mike Zimmer. But today he quote tweeted a Vikings Twitter page, a fan page, literally called fan page, that said the Vikings are listed as one of 4 potential landing spots for Derek Carr, according to NFL.com. Okay. And Kellen Mond quote tweeted that and said they wanted him in 2023. Might be tough to pull him out of retirement, though. What else do you know, Kellen Mond? That's what I want to know. What else is Kellen Mond holding out on us? Does he now just scroll and say, I'm just going to put it out there. Here's everything I know. It's been long enough that people may have forgotten about my time in Minnesota, so I've got to remind them that I was there. And here's a juicy little nugget for you guys to chew on. Well, thank you, Kellen Mond. I appreciate that because it opens up a discussion about Derek Carr and the Minnesota Vikings. So let me take you back to 2023. If you recall, Kirk Cousins had a very good 2022 season in which he won 13 games and led, 8 fourth quarter comebacks for the Minnesota Vikings. And then, they came up short in the playoffs, and the Vikings and Cousins in that offseason were negotiating for a new contract. My understanding from that offseason was that they were fairly close on a new contract, which would have made sense, right? To sign him to a multi-year deal. They can always move on later if they want to, but when somebody wins 13 games, you think, I don't know, if we fire the defensive coordinator and bring in somebody better and run it back or something, right? Who knows what exactly would have happened? We know what played out with them not extending Kirk and with them moving on from a lot of key players. That might have been different had they given an extension to Kirk. And if I'm not mistaken, I recall there being quite a few rumors about the potential of the Vikings trading Cousins away and either signing sort of a bridge quarterback or even trying to draft one that year, but they were not very high on the list. Then there were rumors that they were trying to trade up for Anthony Richardson or CJ Stroud, which of course those guys went at the very top of the draft, so they couldn't get up there, couldn't muster enough draft capital. But I think there was a Brett Coleman tweet, a great YouTuber, Brett Coleman, about the Vikings wanting to get Anthony Richardson and trying to trade up for him and so forth. And that never came to fruition, but clearly they were thinking still about the future, but wanted Cousins, if I recall correctly, to sign sort of a short-term deal. And when Daniel Jones got $40 million a year, then the price went up for just about every quarterback at that point. And the Vikings said, you know what, we're just gonna walk away from the table here and not sign you to an extension, and we'll let you be a lame duck quarterback, which eventually led to one of the great quotes in the history of my life as a reporter when Kirk said, it's not about the dollars, it's what the dollars represent, which still waiting for 50 Cent to make that into a song. But that was what happened, right? With them not extending Kirk Cousins. So I imagine that in 2023, they were weighing their options, because when you don't extend a quarterback like that, that has been your franchise guy for multiple years, then you start getting phone calls. Other teams, and there were teams that got mentioned back then. I don't remember who they were. I think the Colts came up at one point as a team that may have been interested in trading for Kirk Cousins. I don't recall exactly when that was, but there's always teams that don't have quarterbacks that are going to check in. So they could have decided to trade away Cousins because they weren't going to extend him, and then sign Derek Carr to a multi-year contract like the one that the New Orleans Saints did. And you wonder about these things. Now, first, I will say that it's plausible what Kellen Mond is saying, and I would never accuse him of going on Twitter and just making this up. But clearly, Kellen Mond heard this from somewhere, that his team was interested in getting Derek Carr to be their quarterback. Generally speaking, players find out about stuff that happens from the front office when Adam Schefter reports it. Or if their agent calls them and says, hey, in 5 minutes, you're going to see a report that you've been released, or that the team has done X, Y, and Z. So normally, but things get kicked around behind the scenes and you hear things. And maybe that was one of the things that Kellen Mond had heard back then. But remember, Derek Carr, his time had come to an end with the Raiders after the 2022 season, in which, by the way, Devontae Adams had 1,500 yards. I'm just saying that he threw to the number one wide receiver a lot. And I can imagine that when the Vikings were thinking about different ideas, this is a little bit in the same vein of people who put out there that they had considered trading Jefferson and getting Malik Neighbors. And it's like, you throw out a lot of ideas. These people have a lot of days where they're working on stuff and having meetings and having discussions. And there probably was at some point a discussion of, well, what if we did move on from Kirk and then brought in Derek Carr? It would be a similar caliber quarterback. Carr had played well in 2022. I think he was a Pro Bowler, and not the Pro Bowler with like finger quotes like Shadur Sanders or Tyler Huntley Pro Bowler. Like, he had a good season. And so I imagine that they would have looked at that and said, well, if we're looking for a quarterback over multiple seasons to kind of get us through this competitive rebuild, get us in the playoff race and so forth, and Kirk has already decided that he's not going to sign this extension we offered him, what are our other options? And Derek Carr's name would have been fairly high at the top of that list. Now, as far as Derek Carr goes, there was a segment of his podcast that he's doing with his brother, where his brother sort of says, hey, Derek, it's out there that you might be coming back, as if both of them, or, Derek or his representation, wasn't the one who told the NFL insiders that he's interested in coming back. But if you were wondering, Derek Carr did confirm on his podcast that he said, quote, would I come back? The answer is yes. Would I do it for anybody? Absolutely not. I'd have to be healthy, which is interesting, and have a chance to win a Super Bowl. I'd have to be healthy. He's talking about it as if it's someone else. Like, don't you know if you're healthy or not, Derek Carr? I would have to be healthy. Are you? You're you. Don't you know if you're healthy? That's an odd comment, but a team, that he could potentially win the Super Bowl with. What he's saying is, somebody come beg for Derek Carr to play. Someone come get me. I guess I would come outside and play with the kid. Please, come on, Derek, come play. Oh, all right. I guess if you really pull my leg, I'll do it. Or whatever the saying is. Come on, man. Clearly, Derek Carr wants to come back and play football. He probably watched a little Phillip Rivers, and he also probably watched the New Orleans Saints have their quarterback and said, you know what? I don't want the last impression of Derek Carr in the NFL to be the guy who just, left and retired, and then now everybody loves Tyler Shuck. I want to prove that Derek Carr can do it. So, that's fine. You certainly are one of the top 32. I guarantee you that, considering some of the quarterback play from last year really made you look at it and go, actually, Derek Carr was pretty darn good. Which brings us to the peak of this discussion, which is Derek Carr, anyone? Should the Minnesota Vikings be in the Derek Carr business if they were once intrigued by the idea of having Derek Carr as their quarterback, if we believe Kellen Mond, which I have no reason not to believe Kellen Mond heard that at some point? My answer would be, I think yes. And it's similar to Kyler Murray in the discussion for me, where I didn't really look into it much because I thought he was retired. And I didn't really watch him much because he was in New Orleans and they were bad. And I remember watching some of him leading up to the game they played against the Vikings. And that was a really tough day for Derek Carr because he got hurt and had some tough throws. And it was just not a very good day. That was Brian Flores' defense starting to ramp itself up there in 2023. But, I hadn't thought about the idea a whole lot and hadn't thought about him a whole lot when he was a New Orleans Saint. So as I started to look through what he did in New Orleans, and we could take a look at some of his PFF information and some of his stats here. I mean, the box score stats do stand out to you because he threw for 40 touchdowns and only 13 interceptions. The audio setting was not right for there. So here now is Derek Carr and his PFF grades and his stats over those two seasons for 2023 and 2024. And what you didn't hear me saying because I was muted was that, I mean, these are stats that look like a quality NFL starting quarterback. Now, is it a top 5 or top 10 level quarterback performance for New Orleans? No, I would not say that. But when you look at, completion percentages near 70%, a good touchdown to interception ratio, quality grades, 85.6 and 77.2, good ratio of turnover worthy plays, only around 2%, quarterback ratings of 97.7 and 100. And then we look at his game by game up here and we see that we have some very, very good games, 15 yards per attempt in a game against Dallas. Other games here where he threw for over 10 yards per attempt, 80% completion percentage against Cleveland in a 2-touchdown performance. I mean, all of this it's quality quarterback play from Derek Carr as a member of the New Orleans Saints. And those numbers in comparison to what we saw from last year for the Minnesota Vikings, I mean, it blows it out of the water. And if you had those types of numbers, then you would have been talking about being in the playoffs pretty much unequivocally for last year if you're getting similar level play from Derek Carr. Now, that is enticing in itself to try to get Derek Carr here. Also, when you look at, and I know that Michael Thomas was critical of him, but you look at Chris Olave's performance, you look at Devontae Adams when he was with the Raiders. I mean, this is a gentleman who can throw an NFL pass to Justin Jefferson. And if he did join the Vikings, it would be the best supporting cast probably of Derek Carr's career. I mean, when I look over the seasons that he had in Las Vegas / Oakland, I mean, he came into the league in that second season and had a great year. And it always felt a little bit disappointing after that with Carr because he never quite got back to the level. But actually, when we go back to the from a PFF grade perspective, the following season, because he came in 2015 and threw for 32 touchdowns, 13 picks, great season. They won 12 games. The next year in 2016, he had a 28-6 touchdown to interception ratio, 85.3 PFF grade. I mean, these grades routinely put Derek Carr in that Kirk Cousins, peak Kirk Cousins kind of level of quarterback play. So, I mean, I can understand why, if the Vikings are interested, that they would be interested, that they would be looking into the potential for Derek Carr, because if you had a season like this, let's just take an average Derek Carr season, 2020. I mean, he threw for 4,100 yards, 27 touchdowns, 9 picks, 37 big-time throws that year, which had to be one of the highest ratios. and 101.4 quarterback rating. I mean, that would put you right there in that discussion with every other team. If you can improve your defense a bit, if you can find yourself a center, if you could find yourself an explosive running back, and Derek Carr still got it. I have no reason to think that he doesn't. He's only been away for a year. That's happened plenty of times. So I would say that they should be, at very least, in the Derek Carr conversation. It also does not have to be a quarterback that would sign, or I guess it's a little convoluted. They would have to trade for him. And I don't know how that works exactly with his salary cap situation. This could be complicated in trying to acquire Derek Carr. So that is a potential roadblock for him. And I don't know how they could rework the deal or how much New Orleans could eat of the contract. I would imagine that New Orleans, if he's saying, hey, I'm playing again, and he's back and he's on the same contract, which I assume still exists, it doesn't disappear into thin air when he retires, then they would want to move that, right? That they would want to try to move at least some part of that to another team and get some draft capital back rather than just have it sit there or whatever. I mean, if he came back to the New Orleans Saints, which obviously he's not going to do. So there's multiple layers to this thing, but the average Derek Carr performance season, and then sort of superimpose that into this offense, these wide receivers, this offensive line, which I do expect if Darisaw comes back 100% to be a good offensive line, and maybe a little bit more commitment to the run, which I know everybody wants from Kevin O'Connell. I mean, is it the worst thing I've ever heard? Definitely not. I mean, when you compare it to other quarterback options, the Kyler Murray thing, I'll admit, is more risky than this. Derek Carr's injury history is a little scary because he retired because of a mystery shoulder injury, which if you listen to my episode with Nick Underhill the other day, he was a little confused about how that ended up happening. He has had a number of injuries where he's missed time, but even then we go through his seasons. I mean, he had a run of, from the start of his career all the way through 2023, where he threw over 500 passes every single year. So he's been extremely durable. He's been on the field. All it would be, I think, in terms of the reaction, if they were to do it, is the question of, is JJ McCarthy just done? Or is he going to sit behind Derek Carr for a year and learn? Which maybe doesn't sound like the worst idea I've ever heard. And what is your ceiling if you have Derek Carr as your quarterback? Now you could say, well, I mean, another team took not the best quarterback in the world, Sam Darnold, who is still really, really, really good, but not the best quarterback in the league. He's not Allen. He's not Jackson. He's not Mahomes. He's not Burrow. Okay, they just took him to the Super Bowl with a really good defense and an effective enough running game and good wide receivers. Okay, well, you're supposed to have a really good defense. I don't think that logic is insane for a team that needs to maximize everything they have right now. If this team was in a position where half of the roster was young and half of the roster was old, and we were just saying, I don't know, you're going to get stuck in the middle. See, the thing about Kirk Cousins and his last couple years with the Vikings is that they really had a 2-year window to win with Kirk. That was 2018 and 2019. It was very clearly defined 2-year window. They fail in 2018. They win the playoff game in 2019. But Kirk played some of his best football in 2020 and 2021. It's just that their defense completely came apart. They didn't have the money to rebuild it, in part because of Cousins' contract. But if that version of Kirk Cousins, like imagine you could take the 2020 version of Kirk and put him onto the 2026 Minnesota Vikings with Flores, their front seven, maybe an improved offensive line, certainly better guards than he had back then, and peak Jefferson, I mean, you'd be talking about something pretty legit. Well, that's kind of what you could do with Derek Carr, because if you bring back Kirk, he is now much older and you cannot really do that. Derek Carr is, he'd be 35, so he is a little older, but he never had a torn Achilles that would slow him down. I mean, I think it's one of those ideas that feels like it has a ceiling, but the ceiling is a playoff game, winning a playoff game, and getting Justin Jefferson back on track, maybe hitting some explosive, accurate throws. And I don't think that would have to mean, because he is 35, I don't think it would have to mean you guys are completely, epically, unbelievably done with JJ McCarthy, whereas there are other quarterback options that would feel like you are completely done with him. Excuse me. Okay, so let's get your thoughts on this. But I got a couple more quick updates, and then we'll get to it. Kyler Murray, so ESPN on NFL here on Twitter. Field Yates, who is very well dialed in, used to work in the NFL, said today that a change of scenery is best for both parties involved on Kyler Murray and Arizona. So people have asked me, like, wait a minute, why would Arizona fire their coach, get a new coach, and then get rid of their quarterback and leave themselves in quarterback purgatory, right? Why would they do that? And my answer would be, when you look at his contract, he has 3 years left on his deal, and they're all very, very expensive. But he only has guaranteed money left this year. So what usually teams do is they will do a contract like that, but when the guarantees run out, then that's when you negotiate an extension and then lower the cap hit. That's the little trick they do. But if Kyler Murray is going to make 50 or 45 million on your salary cap for a team that's not really ready to win right now and just went all the way to the bottom, I mean, that's pretty hard to justify. And you could kind of take your medicine now and maybe take a lot of that salary back, try to trade something for him and so forth, or just sort of wash your hands and move on. And hey, here's your money. Thanks for the memories. We'll see you later, because you know that it's really unlikely he's not going to sign an extension with him. And you probably don't want to sign an extension with him because you haven't succeeded with him as the quarterback. You've dealt with whatever personality conflicts. And sometimes when somebody, and I'm sure that some of you have had this experience as well, if you work in the same place for a long time, things kind of build up, you know, and sometimes it's just time for somebody to go. So it feels like it's that way with him. And also this tweet made me laugh from Andrew Filipponi, friend of mine. He tweeted, NFL analyst Steve Palazzolo on 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh projects Malik Willis will get $40 million per year in free agency. I don't know that I agree with my friend Steve that he will get $40 million a year. I think with Malik, there's only going to be 3 to 4 teams that are negotiating here, and all of them are not really in a position where they would be saying, hey, all chips to the middle of the table. They're all teams except the Vikings, potentially, that would be more on the rebuild path. The Miami Dolphins, the Arizona Cardinals, the Cleveland Browns, the New York Jets. Those are all teams that it wouldn't make a bit of sense for them to jump completely into the pool of the deep end with a quarterback and invest in them, because they could lose a lot of games and end up with a high draft pick the following season. You don't want that on your salary cap. I look at it as much more of like 2 years and 40 million rather than 40 million per year for Malik Willis. And it's a prove it. Hey, we're going to give you the starting job, but you got to prove that you are really a NFL starting quarterback. So that's kind of your quarterback speculation update of the day, presented by Kellen Mond and wherever he's working now. So let's get to the chat here, and I'll scroll through when you guys were yelling at me for screwing up the audio, but I'll make sure that I never forget to check that again. So Kit says Mond is about to tweet his LinkedIn posts into ESPN2 talking head role. That's a good tweet. That is a good tweet. And I wondered about that myself. I did see that Anthony Barr and Eric Hendricks dipped their toe in a little bit of podcasting. I retweeted that if you want to go look at that. I had been bothering Anthony. I saw him at his retirement thing here in Minnesota, and I mentioned it to him. I was like, you seem like a guy who needs a podcast. And then I did an article with him about Harrison Smith toward the end of the season. If you want to go back and look at that on the newsletter, purpleinsider.football. And, Anthony's great. He's one of the smartest players you'll ever run into. And I was giving him a hard time then. I was like, dude, I think you should get into podcasting. I think you'd be pretty good at it. And so when I saw that, I was like, I knew it. Him and Kendricks, they live next to each other, best friends, great podcast pair. If they can ever really fully let their hair down, I don't know if they would do that, but if they did and showed their whole personalities, that would be really good. But you're right. I wondered about the same thing. It's like, is Kellen starting some sort of YouTube channel or something where he really wants people to remember Kellen Mond played in the NFL? I'm not sure, but I thank him for that insight. And I guess I never really gave a final verdict on Derek Carr because the downside is that it would sort of look like we're just trying to get back to the playoffs, squeak in enough to keep everybody around, and then we'll deal with this later. That's kind of what it looks like. But also, here's why I would say that I'm in on Derek Carr. Now, Kyler Murray is my first choice because I think it's got the highest upside. But the reason that I'm in on Derek Carr is the locker room. When you look around the locker room, these are a bunch of guys who just had their quarterback go win the Super Bowl for someone else. And they just went through a year from hell where they were 4-8 at one point and where their quarterback couldn't stay healthy. And then when he's out there, he's not playing well. And then he has a few highlight type of games and then he's hurt again. And then this whole thing. And so they went through that. And the guys who are in their prime, your Jonathan Grenards and Blake Cashmans and Justin Jeffersons, so forth, they all feel like, what was that for? We sat here and wasted a year while the Seattle Seahawks got to win with our quarterback. It feels like you have to give that locker room a real quarterback. Somebody who is proven, who's done it before. I come to you with this gesture of peace. It's like coming home with flowers from work after you've been in a fight with the wife. Here, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to stick you guys with a quarterback who wasn't ready. Will you accept this? And from JJ McCarthy's standpoint, here's the thing about McCarthy. If he were to sit a year behind Derek Carr, number one, I don't think Derek Carr is necessarily a guy who's yeah, come on, be my little bro or whatever, but he is a pro and he has been around and he's won a lot of football games in the NFL. And even with a bad New Orleans team, he was over 500. He was 14-13. But at least here's a pro. He's going to go about his business like a pro. He's going to play football games like a pro, and you can watch him not from the recovery room, from inside the room. You can see what that's really like for that starting quarterback to do his job on a day in, day out basis. Derek Carr with his injury history probably also doesn't play 17. That would be my guess. So if McCarthy could get into a couple of games, maybe he wins them one, maybe the confidence starts to grow. But here is the big point about McCarthy. If he were to sit 1 year behind Derek Carr, if we look at Sam Darnold, and I know this is not a fair example because of Darnold's raw talent, I think is a little bit on a different level. I also think that his mental ability and toughness is on a different level for most human beings too. But he sat a year in San Francisco and he has multiple times cited that year of sitting in San Francisco as being the turning point for him in watching Brock Purdy play up close in that quarterback room, going through the preparation with Kyle Shanahan, and then coming to Minnesota ready to play point guard is what he said time and time again. And you see the difference between Darnold not trying to do too much, staying within himself, some of the things that JJ McCarthy needs to learn how to do. So I don't even dislike this for McCarthy. It doesn't have to be done. And then it's a real test of character. If you can go to the bench and have the humility to be a backup quarterback and to learn and get better and grow and develop, there's a chance that you could still make this work. So from those kind of perspectives, I think they can make the playoffs. I think it would go over pretty well with the locker room. I think he would give the freaking ball to Justin Jefferson endlessly. I think they have a defense to prop him up when he has his ups and downs. I think they can improve in the running game. The offensive line is reasonable enough for him to play, and you don't have to necessarily be done with JJ McCarthy. So there's the argument. Kellen, who is funny. Yeah. Kellen Mond, man. I don't know. This is the world we live in, right? I did not expect Kellen Mond to show up in my feed. Hunter, why don't you want to see more of him? It was the exact line from Courtney Cronin was, don't you at least want to get a look at Mond? And it was not particularly. And Chip Scoggins said, why not? And he said, because I see him in practice every day. And it was incredibly mean. It was incredibly mean. Somebody asked about JJ McCarthy and his big time throw percentage. I mean, we're talking about such a small sample size, but one of the things that I have noticed about rightfully Hunter points out, Jameis Winston had a very good big time throw rate, and we can look at other quarterbacks. Like it doesn't mean it's not some guarantee like, oh, well, he had these big time throws that it's great. But the one thing about McCarthy that stands out when I look at his data is that throwing in the intermediate areas, 10 to 19 yards, was by far his biggest success. And that is a lot of the Vikings offense. But when he was asked to throw quick game, when it was the most basic type of get a completion plays, that's when he was atrocious. That's the timing stuff. That's the rhythm, like drop back, hit the back foot, hit somebody accurately between 0 and 10 yards. It was a disaster for him. But when he actually sort of could let loose a little bit and fire it down the field, he graded pretty well. And I do think what you're talking about, sometimes that stat can be really telling, which is, hey, Matthew Stafford always has big time throws and Josh Allen always has big time throws. But in a very tiny sample size, I don't think it means almost anything, because you can kind of like think about like throwing a ball up for grabs and your receiver gets it and you might get a big time throw for that. Like, is that really telling over a big enough sample? Like, not really. We're talking about, I mean, I can look it up here, but I think in total, it was probably like 10, in the top quarterbacks in a season get 30. How many was it actually in total? Because this is why trying to reach for stats to make something look a little better than it is can be dubious. Yeah, it was 19 of them. 19 of them in 243 dropbacks. Like that's a pretty good rate. But also too many turnover worthy plays, way too many sacks, and not anywhere near accurate enough. So kind of, if you're going to be super aggressive down the field all the time, which McCarthy was, then you're going to hit on some of those. But I also think that we know that JJ McCarthy has the arm. Nobody ever said that he didn't. And we know that he is gutsy and is willing to take a risk. No one ever said that he wasn't. So that was something I would expect. Is it proof that he could work out? I don't think that it is. But I also think we saw different parts of games that would make you think it eventually could. There are some quarterbacks, and this is really the difference probably between him and Christian Ponder. There are some quarterbacks where you just never saw any wow factor. JJ McCarthy had some wow factor throughout this year that made you think, all right, well, there's something there. And I have said time and time again that I believe that JJ McCarthy, with the right development, can be an NFL starting quarterback. And I think probably the best thing for him with this franchise is to have a Derek Carr in front of him or a Kyler Murray in front of him for 1 year and then see where he's at. And if he does develop in that year, maybe we're talking about a redemption arc for him. Usually when a quarterback gets benched, it's sort of so devastating to their chances that that's the end. Or they've just been so bad. And McCarthy, by the numbers, was pretty darn rough. But with such a small amount of play that he's actually had, if he were to have 2026 on the bench, maybe he starts 3 or 4 games due to an injury with a veteran there who's there to get them into the playoffs. This is something that would have happened in history's past, like if you go back to, I don't know, like the 80s, the early 90s, John Schneider was actually talking about this, talking about NFL Europe and the different quarterbacks that he'd seen along the way that get him on the pod. Hey, Kellen's welcome to come on the pod for sure if he wants to. It seems like he wants to talk about it, doesn't it? But, John Schneider was talking about how the number of quarterbacks, and I think he named Brad Johnson, that had come through and had developed and eventually got there. We just don't do it anymore because it seems like think about what everyone did to Sam Darnold when it didn't work out. They just slaughter a guy, and you got these owners who are lunatics that are firing coaches every other year and stuff like that. Like there's usually no time for that sort of patience with a young quarterback. So I am of the belief that JJ McCarthy has enough talent, but he has to learn how the NFL works. And if you are still in the phase of learning how the NFL works, how to carry yourself as a franchise quarterback, how to play quarterback in the NFL, going into next year with that pressure cooker, think about this. There was a lot of pressure on him this year, and it didn't go particularly well. You think there's not more next year where you've already fired your general manager? You've already got the entire world cackling at you because you let go the Super Bowl quarterback. You've got the Wilfs hiring a new GM, potentially somebody who is going to evaluate your head coach. So you got a bunch of guys' careers, maybe your head coach, and you talk about, being made fun of last year for the whole 9 stuff, which I've never done, by the way. Yeah, the whole, that whole thing. But that people had a lot of jokes and a lot of things to say, right? And a lot of mean things to say to JJ McCarthy last year. And we saw him because look at his age. It's impossible to stay offline. And I'm sure Sam Darnold, saw him when it was going on, but now the world's even different. You're going to ask him to take on that when he still essentially feels like a rookie to me, with the way that, he performed and how few throws he got. That's a lot. That's why I am okay with the Derek Carr idea. That's why I don't think it's that crazy. KFT says Derek Carr took the Raiders within a touchdown of beating the Bengals, then went to the Super Bowl and lost by 3 points to Kansas City. He is a good quarterback throughout his career. He is, what's a comp for him? Like a Trent Green or something, or like a Dave Craig from the past. I'm sure that you guys can come up with something better than that. There, throughout history, has been a lot of these quarterbacks that are good, but either never have it go quite right or have some sort of flaw that keeps them from making it. And Kirk Cousins falls in the same exact category as Derek Carr. They're kind of doppelgangers because AFC, NFC, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins, because they don't have the best mobility and they are really good throwers. I mean, Derek Carr can throw the football, and he can throw with anticipation. He can throw into windows, and you see those completion percentages, those PFF grades, like he can throw. And that was true of Kirk. Like Kirk was accurate. Kirk knew how to throw on time. He knew how to run an offense. He knew how to be in command. But with both of them, there is that athletic ability that was not of the next level that usually you need, that playmaking to get through an entire playoffs. And even with Sam Darnold, he had a huge scramble the other day that helped put away that game. And he's not a runner, but he has that tool in his bag and also has one of the best arms in the league. And I think with Carr and Cousins, neither one of them ever had this beastly, insane, holy cow, this is the best arm in the league. Carr's is better, I think, in terms of arm strength overall. And Kirk may have been a little more pinpoint at times, but they're in the ballpark in a lot of different categories. And there's similar questions about Carr and kind of his leadership style and whether it rubs some people the wrong way. And that always existed with Kirk. But, I do think that Kevin O'Connell is the guy who can smooth those things out. That's for sure. Dan says, why would we want Carr? Why would we want Cousins? Why? Well, I just laid out this scenario with all the players in the locker room who are really expecting to get back to the playoffs next year. With Kirk, the difference is an Achilles. That's the difference. I mean, with an Achilles tear, he's just not the same guy. Derek Carr's had a year to get healthy. So if he is the same guy and he performs like he did in New Orleans, that would be, I think, pretty good here. Zed says Carr wants to be the next Wentz. I mean, Carson Wentz is nowhere near as good as Derek Carr. Carson Wentz had a good start to his career, and that was kind of it. I mean, I think that he did a lot of good things with the Raiders, and I think he did a lot of good things with New Orleans. And this team is probably better than whoever they had, for most of those times. They had some okay teams, but they didn't have Justin Jefferson except for when they had Devontae Adams, and that went actually really well between Derek Carr and Devontae Adams. In fact, Devontae Adams wanted to go to the Raiders because of Derek Carr. And then he threw him the football like crazy. And then they got rid of him. Mike says, do you think that Flores would allow a draft pick to fill Harry's spot, or could only a veteran manage a similar role? That is a very good non-quarterbacky question, and I appreciate that, of bumping us to some other part of the roster, which is definitely allowed. I think that there are a couple of guys in this draft, McNeil Warren and Thieneman. McNeil Warren's from Toledo, and Thieneman is from Oregon, who look like they would be Brian Flores fits. What you would do is that you would not have them be that guy. You would have Josh Metellus be that guy. So Metellus would play the role of Harrison Smith, as he did at the beginning of the season, and you would try to get your rookie where he could play fast, play simple, not have all these different things that he had to read and react and change to, and just use his athleticism at first and then slowly build along throughout the season to where he gets it. And then you're hoping for a complete player there. I would not take that off the table. And considering that even great safety prospects drop lower than they're expected, that is something the Vikings might be able to address in the second round. Think about, Derwin James, Kyle Hamilton, both of those guys were projected very, very high and ended up going in the middle. And even Xavier Watts was a third rounder when most people had him as, maybe mid-second round last year. Nicky Minwore, who people had in the first round, he ends up slipping into day 2. And all these guys have worked out really, really well for the most part. So safety seems to be still a position in the NFL that teams are kind of willing to let drop in the draft. So if, somebody like McNeil Warren ends up going in the second round, the Vikings could be there, to pick him up. I wouldn't count that out. I think safety would be very important, assuming that, you're talking about Harrison Smith retiring. 1216 Vivek. Curious to know your take on if the Vikings take a similar path as the Falcons and hire a former player as GM or president of operations. Which former Vikings player can fit there? I would not expect that. I think that the Wilfs want a structure of head coach, GM, ownership. I don't know if they want, and they could do this because everything is really on the table, or they could make Rob Brzezinski president of football operations. So you have the Wilfs, then Brzezinski, then the GM and the coach work underneath. I actually don't dislike that. I actually kind of like that idea to have, because this is what I really want from the Wilfs. I don't want a head coach and a GM that are clashing and then everyone has to kind of pick sides, because that's happened twice now under the current structure where it's supposed to be, well, you have some of the power and you have some of the power and everybody be friends. It needs to be, this is the person the Wilfs are never going to fire because that is their guy. Rob Brzezinski makes a lot of sense for that. But if Rob Brzezinski then plays a huge role in hiring a GM and is like president of football ops and then GM and then coach, and that's your structure, I kind of like that for a power structure, because then you have that person who is there every single day, the liaison to the Wilfs, who can tell them the coach and the GM aren't getting along and we got to figure this out, as opposed to it going on behind the scenes for 2 or 3 years. And then we finally kind of get some resolution on it. I don't think you want that. anymore. I mean, it's already happened twice. You don't want that again. As far as a former player goes, though, I don't know. I saw Jared Allen on Kay Adams' show the other day, and I thought, I wonder what Jared Allen would do as a general manager. Just get all speed rushers or something. I don't know. Yeah, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that fits that. I will say, to Kirk Cousins' credit, he is going to be a great broadcaster if he wants to. But I think Kirk could actually do a job like that. I think that Kirk Cousins, from the times that we talked with him about different stuff around the league, this guy knows every player inside and out, and he really understands like high level thinking of a franchise and a roster construction. And I actually think it was maybe to his detriment a little bit sometimes that he could see the entire picture. But if you listen to him do his broadcasting, already he sounded like a guy who could be an NFL executive. But I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of smart former players out there. Who wants to be that? I don't know. There isn't like a Matt Ryan for the Vikings in the same way. But if they were to do a structure that had Brzezinski at the very top and the GM who runs day-to-day roster stuff below him, and he works with the coach, that I think would be good. It needs to be someone they really, really trust to be over the GM and the coach if you're going to do it that way. KFT says, I heard there are 3 teams he would play for, and the Vikings are one of the teams. Maybe is that the NFL.com report about 4 teams? I mean, why wouldn't you if you were Derek Carr? If you were looking at teams to play for, because there was a little bit about, well, maybe he could go to the Raiders with Clint Kubiak. But when he says compete for a Super Bowl, I'm sorry, they're just not for next year. They could be fun, but they're not competing for a Super Bowl. Not with Denver there, not with Kansas City with the fire lit under their butt. I mean, not with the Chargers, with Mike McDaniel. No way. So which quarterback, actually, let's go through this. Is there any other quarterback needy team in the NFL that you would actually say could compete for a Super Bowl? Now, I know you can, the snark. The Vikings will never compete for the Super Bowl. Yeah, I know. You can leave that in the comments if you like. But who actually has the defense to make an argument? Who actually has a recent season where they have performed at a very, very high level like the Vikings have? Who has, in the past, not so much this year, but in the past, maximized a quarterback and their production? I don't think that Kevin O'Connell's reputation in the league changed a ton after this year. I think most people looked at it like, wow, what a mistake. But I don't think they thought, oh, wow, this guy forgot how to do quarterback stuff. Not Its Work says, I'm on Team Murray or Team McCarthy and not budging. I don't blame you for that. And I think here's where and this is something we can update the standings as time goes by. The standings for me would be Kyler Murray at the top because it represents the highest upside potential. It's a guy that if it clicks, you feel like it's going to really click and it could get super exciting with Kyler Murray. That he is the only one that sort of screams Sam Darnold. The next guy who was still on the younger side, still in his prime, that had a bad organization that he was with, and he comes to you reinvigorated, and he finds himself, and he runs around and throws the ball to Justin Jefferson. It's awesome. I mean, that world exists. Derek Carr is let's get this bus back on the road. Let's make sure that this franchise doesn't teeter-totter and fall over. And then you got spilling out all these veterans who wasted years of their careers, and you got spilling out, a head coach who's fired, and now you're doing a whole new revamp of the front office, and the GM's hiring a new coach, and you're looking for a new quarterback. Like if you go with McCarthy and it goes sideways, this franchise in 2027 could look insanely different, which maybe you'll say is okay, but like you don't want to let go of Van Ginkel, Cashman, Grenard, all these guys who are in their primes and are still playing really well. Darisaw coming back, maybe the last years of Brian O'Neill. You have, Addison in his situation is not great, but like his performance, he is a good player still. Donovan Jackson, a budding player. You got the best kicker. Like, you don't want to waste these things. So that's where you could see number 2 on the list being, I mean, I like the Malik Willis swing a little bit more maybe than Derek Carr because of upside, but you could see Derek Carr like stabilizing the franchise and getting it back on a track where you're actually competing and trying to get to the playoffs and then addressing your quarterback situation really down the road. You can see that. This is where I was muted. Oh, thank you, Kit, for giving the super chat while I was muted. Thank you. You guys couldn't read lips? Matt, that's very funny. He says, thought he said you should never draft a wide receiver in the first round. You want to get blocked, Matt? That's how you get blocked, saying that we don't draft a first round wide receiver. We always do. Hey, look, I'm just saying, last year I was advocating Luther Burden. Luther Burden on the Vikings right now would look pretty good. I'm just saying. We have not had a FanDuel question of the day yet. So let me see here if I can dig one up. How about this? NFL MVP is one of the things out right now that you can look at for next year. If you had to give a sleeper MVP, who would it be for next year? Like, we're on to next year. We're starting to think about like what could be interesting. What do we expect for next year? Who would be a sleeper, like low-key, long shot MVP that's also within reason? And I think the answer for me is Jaden Daniels at plus 2,000. I saw that they are going to put him under center more often than they did before. So that's an interesting one. I don't know. The favorite is Josh Allen at plus 600. Jaden Daniels at plus 2,000 would be at the top of my list for a sleeper MVP for next year. That is your FanDuel question of the day. Back to your questions. Why is he miming? Hello, darkness, my only friend. Sorry. Oh, and thank you, Tim Bob, for the super chat. I'm going to do that more often. I'm going to shut off the audio, and then you guys give the super chats. Lenny says, worry that Derek Carr has regressed with the injury and age. So that's an interesting discussion because sometimes there have been examples of guys who took a year off of football and came back and were actually much better because they were constantly grinding through injuries. And one of them is Randall Cunningham. Randall Cunningham started his own business. Maybe you've heard this story before. And I think it was doing flooring or sheetrock or something. And then came back in 97 and was a backup for Brad Johnson, ended up winning a playoff game, and then ends up as the starter eventually in 1998 after Brad gets hurt, has one of the greatest seasons ever offensively, and the rest is history. It has happened. I mean, even like Richie Incognito was out of football, maybe not necessarily for, retirement, but he was out of football for a little bit. And I was there in Buffalo when they signed him. And I remember saying, why sign this guy? I mean, he's been out of football for a year. He might be a problem. I don't know. And he was a beast. And he was a beast for multiple years. And honestly, had the Vikings signed him when he was available, maybe that would have been good for them because he continued to be absolutely fantastic at football. But I think he played better after he came back from the year off. I mean, think about the amount of mileage on these guys' bodies. Derek Carr was probably playing through stuff when he was in New Orleans and has had a year to get healthy. But I still love that he said it in that tweet, or in that podcast. He said it as if he was like, well, if Derek Carr is healthy, and you're like, you're Derek Carr, are you healthy? So I guess we still don't know. He would have to be healthy. They would have to be able to get a look at something medically. And this is where there's complications. What are they going to do about a trade to New Orleans? What are they going to do for draft capital? I couldn't go more than a fourth to get Derek Carr. And then how is he medically? That matters a lot. Denny says, just woke up from an 8-month coma, jumped on the live stream. Why are we talking about David Carr? Derek Carr, but David is on his podcast. Is JJ okay? The answer seems to be not really. Reconnected says you're assuming Carr can beat out McCarthy. I guarantee you Carr can beat out McCarthy. There's no question in my mind. McCarthy's just not, it's not going to have 4 months where somebody goes bibbity bobbity boo and all of a sudden he knows how to throw the ball like Derek Carr, who's been in the league for that many years and has that much knowledge. Derek Carr is going to learn the offense in an eye blink, and he can throw the ball as well as most starting NFL quarterbacks. And it's not Josh Allen, it's not Patrick Mahomes, but he's a guy that has thrown 30 touchdowns in the NFL before, and he's thrown to a number one wide receiver for 1,500 yards. Like, yeah, he's beating out JJ McCarthy. My point is that that's okay, and that you need McCarthy to develop for a year and then give it another shot. And it's not wrong, but are so, and this is how we got here, obsessed with the rookie quarterback contract, as everyone should be, wanting that cheat code. But sometimes you miss the forest through the trees. That's what happened with the Vikings, is you missed the forest through the trees, and the forest, the trees, were the trees Sam Darnold in this thing? I don't know. But the big picture was, you got to have the rookie quarterback contract. You got to maximize it. And that's right. And that's the right way to team build. The forest was or maybe the trees, forest. I don't know how this works, but he wasn't ready. And it doesn't work, the rookie quarterback contract advantage, if the kid's not ready. That's the point, the fact that he was not ready. That's what undid this. So now, can you have him develop for a year behind another quarterback and then still have at least some time left, at least a year on his rookie contract to prove it? Then maybe if he does, you're talking about, all right, you sign him to a deal into the future that's reasonable. Like, I don't know. It doesn't have to be impossible for this still to work out with JJ McCarthy, but if Derek Carr's healthy, he's winning that battle, because you're bringing him here. If he comes here, there's no battle, actually. If he comes here, there's no battle. You heard him. He's not gonna come out of retirement to go battle with a 23-year-old. Like, no, he's taking the job. There's no way that happens. Yeah, KFT. I mean, why did he say, is he healthy, if he's already telling people clearly that he would unretire? He must be healthy. It's almost like his brain went into like analyst mode or something, because he's been doing this podcast. So he's like, yeah, if that guy's healthy, like, Derek, you're you. If Matthew's healthy, he'll do the live stream tonight. Like, oh wait, that's me. I'm me. That's funny. Lenny says, I'd rather find out what we have in McCarthy than bring in Derek Carr. That kind of logic got you into a lot of trouble this year, I think. I'd rather find out what we have in McCarthy than bring back Sam Darnold. Whoops. I mean, how about this? Would you rather put JJ McCarthy in a position, here's your two options, in a position where every person in that locker room is looking at you going, the guy who left here won the Super Bowl, bro. You better be good. You better win. You better take this enormous, ridiculous step. And the coach is looking at him saying, daddy needs to keep his job, so you better be great this year, right? Or I'm out. So there's that much pressure on you. And by the way, yeah, you only threw 243 passes last year, so you don't still really know how to throw the ball in the NFL just because you went, I don't know what, and worked out over the summer or spring. I mean, come on, like, we're expecting this. He can improve for sure, but it took even the Josh Allen example that everybody loves so much. It took Josh Allen 2 years in order to be good. He was very poor throwing the ball in 2018. He was a little bit better in 2019, and then it wasn't until 2020 that he took that big step, 900 passes later. But hey, if you don't take that big step, our coach is fired. The locker room is going to want to throw you in Lake Minnetonka, and your career might be cooked. Certainly is in Minnesota if it doesn't work out. Good luck, kid. Or would you rather have Derek Carr, Kyler Murray take the reins for a year, get this team into the playoffs, have him learn how to play football? See, when you say find out what we have, but if someone's not ready, what you're going to find out is they're not ready. You're going to find it out again. So let's say you find out, again, he's not ready. Like, where does that benefit the franchise? It just blows the franchise to smithereens. Maybe you want that. I don't know. I don't know that most people do. I think most people want this team back in the playoffs. So if he develops for a year, learns a lot about himself, sitting and watching, because he really didn't have that opportunity to go through practice every day. He didn't have that opportunity at all in 2024. Yeah, he got to watch from afar. Yeah, he got to put the earpiece in and listen to the calls. It's not the same as going through practice day in and day out. Maybe he gets into a couple of games. Maybe he plays the entire preseason. That would be good for him, right? The longer term approach was always the best one with JJ McCarthy, and they tried to expedite the process because they were mad at Sam Darnold for melting down in 2 games, and they thought that that was evidence he couldn't do it. And they also thought that he would pick up where he left off for his development. That did not happen. So now you get a chance to kind of undo a wrong, and then he can sink or swim with the way he handles that. Which one of those 2 options is better? I mean, I think if you've built a roster this good with guys who could get you to 9-8, despite the fact that you had the 28th best quarterback play in the league, I'd like to see what they could do with an average quarterback. I'd like to see what they could do with the 14th best quarterback in the league, which is probably what Derek Carr would be. And I'd also like to see what JJ McCarthy could do with a year of development, because now the entire world is shouting at the rooftops, you have to be methodical with some of these young quarterbacks. And the league has not been recently, and it's a person-to-person basis, but I think McCarthy is the prime candidate for someone that needs to develop over multiple years. Denny says, for my sanity, I need JJ to become great. I can't do the quarterback carousel anymore. Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, this franchise has just never been blessed in that way. But you know what happens? You know what happens once you get that quarterback is that then the expectations go up and you start the season, hey, if we don't win the Super Bowl, that person's a massive disappointment and they're not good enough. So you go on and on. Like it's all different circles of the same hell for every team that doesn't win the Super Bowl. But if you're the Los Angeles Chargers, I mean, you've got your guy, you're not going to have another quarterback for a long time, and he just can't seem to get you there. And then every season when it begins, it's not like, oh, let's see how this plays out. It's, all right, is he going to show up in January or not? Just get there. And that's not that fun sometimes either. Jay Power says, stop the excuses. Football is a team sport. Sam Darnold's legit. Vikings fans hate success from former players. I don't know who you're talking to there, but like this has been the, hey, Sam Darnold's actually really good show. So it is a team sport. That's right. He did not alone lose those games for the Vikings, just like he did not alone win that game for Seattle, just like every other quarterback that's ever played. Lenny says, Kirk Cousins is my favorite option because it leaves room for McCarthy to grow while still raising the floor of the quarterback room. Well, I don't see how that's different from Derek Carr, but Derek Carr is actually probably better at football right now than Kirk Cousins. So I think if you're along that line of thinking, which is not a bad line of thinking, that you'd prefer Carr over Cousins. I mean, watching Cousins play, it wasn't horrible. He won some games with Atlanta, but it looked like a guy who, 40% of his passes or so were behind the line of scrimmage. I mean, it looked like a guy who was really having to strain to just drop back to throw because of where he is physically right now, as opposed to, a Derek Carr that's been sitting and getting back healthy. And he's 35, which, for a quarterback's not too bad. 35 is definitely old, but it's not ancient by quarterback standards. I mean, a lot of these quarterbacks have played into their late 30s. KFT, I don't think KOC wants to find out that McCarthy didn't improve in the offseason. They need insurance, and Wentz was not good last year, but neither was the O-line. Well, yeah, the O-line was problematic in some games, but certainly not all of them. But as far as not wanting to think, I don't really understand that about McCarthy improving. I'm sure that Kevin O'Connell would love nothing more than to show up at TCO Performance Center for OTAs and have McCarthy looking like Drew Brees. I'm sure he is every night looking up at the stars and praying to the football gods, please, please let JJ McCarthy take this huge step forward, because that would be really good for my career. But the odds of the step being as big as it needs to be, this is always a thing that I end up getting into, which is like, look, when you have a baseball player and let's say they have raw power and you really like their potential, but you go, well, yeah, I can't really field. And, he strikes out a ton, doesn't really make contact, doesn't hit for average, little concerned about, his ability to read pitches and doesn't hit sliders. But he's got a lot of power. It's like, okay, so you just name like 5-6 things that this guy has to correct in order to be good. That's where we're at with McCarthy. Can you correct them over several years? Yes. I think if Jordan Love had played right away, he would have looked like McCarthy. But instead, he had time to develop. And you need time. It's not, you get out of the season in January. He needed probably a couple weeks before his hand would heal to feel good about throwing. You're into the playoffs, and now you're into the offseason. You got OTAs coming up in what? 6 weeks or something? It's not a really long offseason. It's a pretty short offseason. And there's only so much developing somebody could do. But if it's more methodical than that, if it's a multi-year type of plan, then I think there's a better chance. Kerpluppy isn't Carr the CEO of the hospital ball. I don't want Carr to turn Jets into Olave. Well, if you look at Olave's first season with Derek Carr, he was fantastic. He had like 87 catches or something. And was he rookie of the year or in that conversation? He is known for that, yes. But I also think that there could be some bad luck element of that. He throws with anticipation, which sometimes takes receivers into tough places. But that was also said constantly about Trevor Lawrence. And what the great receivers tend to be really good at is not getting their heads taken off. But you're not wrong about that. I think that Jefferson's got a pretty good ability to avoid taking big hits, as we've seen throughout his career. But that has happened with Derek Carr before. And there's been questions from some of his teammates about his leadership style, accountability. I think that it was mentioned by Nick Underhill the other day about press conferences and whether it takes responsibility when things go wrong and stuff like that. Like there's things there. But when you look at the end of the day, what are the numbers and what could he do for your team in a 1-year type of scenario with Justin Jefferson? You go back to that Devontae Adams 1,500 yard season and go, well, it's kind of that. Julian says, wouldn't mind Derek Carr, but I think Kyler Murray's the better option. Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think it's crazy different in terms of which quarterback might fit a little better with KOC's system and what he wants to do. But Kyler Murray actually has a surprising number of things that do fit. I looked at this yesterday because I wrote an article about whether KOC needs to change his offense. And I found something very funny, which is that almost everything from the 2024 passing game on paper looks exactly the same as the Seahawks. The play action percentage, the under center percentage, the average depth of target, the average depth of completion, the route tree and completion chart to the number one wide receiver. Like it all looks really, really close. And, neither the Seahawks nor the 2024 Vikings had overly efficient running games. Now they used it a little bit more than the Vikings. We know that. And, they were able to lean on it when they needed to, which the Vikings really couldn't in 2024. But the actual biggest difference between the 2024 Vikings and the 2025 Seattle Seahawks, do you know what the biggest difference was? When you compare their two offenses, not crazy different, especially the passing games, almost identical. The biggest difference was, sacks was one, which is not, I think that's not so much. Their offensive line was a little better than the Vikings in 24 after Darisaw went out. So that was an issue. But I also think that Sam Darnold learned to get rid of the football a little bit faster, just developing, just getting even a little bit better from the previous season. The biggest difference is that the Seattle Seahawks had a true elite defense, and the Vikings in 2024 had just a pretty good defense. But Seattle has an unbelievable defense this year. They were much better statistically than the 2024 Vikings. And I think that was really, the biggest gap. And then, that getting rid of the football, a healthy offensive line is the other thing too. But the actual passing game and how he went about it, the number of explosive plays, throwing down the field, success, throwing to a number one receiver, all very similar. Just kind of interesting, isn't it? But Kyler, I think, under center in a boot type of game where he could roll out a little bit and move away and find some of those throwing lanes and scramble, actually worked pretty well in 2024. And there is definitely that extra gear to him than there is to Derek Carr. But Carr would be much more of a straight drop back, hit the back foot, balls out to Justin Jefferson. Different styles. The age difference to me matters. The athletic difference to me matters for the upside. So I would probably go Kyler Murray as well in the number one spot. Carl says Malik Willis to Miami makes so much sense that he would go to Miami. They are not a very good team though. And is he going to be, because we're talking nonstop about circumstances, supporting casts and all those things. Like, is he going to be supported if he goes to the Miami Dolphins? I don't know. Can't really see it. They're losing Mike McDaniel. Now, if McDaniel was there, that would make a lot of sense to me, but they're losing Mike McDaniel. I think their running game will probably regress a little bit. I don't know. That's the thing about Willis is I don't think he has great choices. Denny, funny. Where are all the Kyle Sloter fans when you need them? Kellen Mond and Kyle Sloter. Now, there's two guys who should do a podcast about the Vikings and just air the grievances. They've kind of done a little bit of it, but air their grievances. Kirk was not accurate throwing over 30 yards. Now is true. Yeah. Throwing deep is not. He was really in Atlanta able to throw intermediate, but deep, that's gone. I think once upon a time, he was really good at that. Denny says, didn't the Saints guy say Carr was weird in the Saints locker room? He may have used the word weird, but even with the Raiders, there's a little bit of, and it was like this with Kirk, there's a little bit of personality that's maybe doesn't gel with everybody. And I think that accountability thing kept coming up of, people thinking like, does he really, put it all on him in post games and stuff like that, which, they expect from the quarterback. So maybe there's some of that. I think KOC might be able to smooth that over, but you're really only asking for a year. And if it went amazing, maybe you'd go 2 years, but you're really only looking for a year. Can you get a professional quarterback to come play here for a year and make this team competitive with the roster you have? That's what you're looking for. The Magic Man, JJ's not accurate at any range. What's your point? That, unfortunately has been the truth, but from that 10 to 19 was where he was at his best. That's why I was pointing out, when you have some of those big time throw percentages, him being able to just crank up the arm and let it rip did get into tight windows sometimes and turn into really spectacular throws. There's the one in the end zone against the Ravens with Naylor for a touchdown. That was a really good throw. There's the one to Naylor again in the end zone against Dallas. That was, pinpoint to him in the corner of the end zone. So he had some of those where he could just kind of let loose. It was the down to down consistency. So big time throws is great if you can have that consistency. If you don't, and you also have a bunch of turnover worthy plays, then it's not really all that good. Dan talking about the last 4 games of McCarthy. Like with the people who roll this stuff out, like with the last 4 games, of which he didn't even make it through all 4 games. You're kind of just, are you just sort of like trying to talk yourself into it? Are you trying to talk other people into it? Or are you trying to talk yourself into it? Because nothing works that way. For one, nothing works that way. Well, if we only take this little section of time where he was good, I mean, we can't do that. If you do that with Sam Darnold and the Jets, he had this little run that was pretty good. But I think when the Jets moved on from him, it made sense. I think he would even say that. EJ Manuel had a run. I've made that comparison before. Christian Ponder. I bet I could go into Christian Ponder's game log and find 4 games where it went decently. We all watched those games. We all know who they were against. 3 of the teams fired their defensive coordinator. Another team wasn't playing their starters. The Giants game wasn't anything particularly special. And the Packers game and the Giants game, he got hurt. And also there was a whole rest of the season. And also, when has anybody defended the performance? When has anybody said what you just said? Kevin O'Connell, teammates, anybody. I mean, we all kind of know that those last 4 games were progress, but they were also in the dumbed down offense versus the worst defenses in the league when all the pressure was already off. It was preseason. And that's why I called it fool's gold as it was happening. It's like, these are classic fool's gold type of games. And it was okay, by the way. It wasn't spectacular. It was okay. It wasn't like everyone watched that and went, oh my gosh, the corner's been turned. There was a good game against Dallas, and there's enough flashes from McCarthy where you think someday it could work for him. But if they thought that, you would have heard someone defend him, including Kevin O'Connell, who had multiple chances to say he's my quarterback. So there's really not a lot of point of talking about like, oh, in the last 4 games, like it just doesn't really mean anything. Lenny, you bring in a quarterback to raise the floor, not the ceiling. The ceiling lies with JJ McCarthy. Is that true? Because I heard that last year about Sam Darnold. I heard that McCarthy's ceiling was higher because he was clutch or something. I was told that in the comment section last year, that the ceiling was higher. Every player, let's be honest. Let's all be very honest about JJ McCarthy. I think he can make it. I'll say it 100 times. I think he can make it. I think he's going to work really hard at it. And I think his skill set from a raw tools perspective is there. And I think his playmaking mindset, I think he could do it. His ceiling's not that high, guys. It's really not. It's just not. Those tools are good. They're not great. He does not have Josh Allen's arm. He doesn't have Lamar Jackson's running ability. There's not one tool that I would consider elite. And all quarterbacks who have struggled with accuracy early in their career, they never become top notch at accuracy, including Josh Allen, by the way. Like, Allen has been a monster and makes plays that are so breathtaking and unbelievable that your eyes pop out of your head. He also has games where he can't hit the broadside of a barn, but he makes up for it with unreal running ability, astonishing physical skills, 6'6", 240 pounds, never takes sacks. Like, there's no comp there. The ceiling of players who have started their career like this is like Ryan Tannehill, maybe an Alex Smith, but I don't really see that with him either. Like, I don't see the style of play. Smith was accurate and very conservative, safe type of football player. Just because someone has not played doesn't mean their ceiling is higher than someone who has played. The ceiling with Derek Carr, if he were to come back and play like he did in New Orleans, where he threw 40 touchdowns and 13 picks over 2 years, is that you're in a playoff game with a top 5 defense lining up saying, we got a chance to go compete for a Super Bowl here. That's the ceiling with Derek Carr. I don't know that that's the ceiling in 2026 with JJ McCarthy if you're asking him to take this enormous leap in one season. Whereas guys who have even done it eventually, like Tannehill or Alex Smith, they've needed multiple seasons in order to get there. So I think that is a myth when we talk about, like, every player who hasn't done it, their ceiling's higher than the guy who's actually played. I don't think it works that way. The Magic Man says, Vikings probably view Carr as safer to bring in than Kirk. Easier guy for JJ to objectively beat out of the job. There's no beating out. There's no beating out. If Derek Carr comes out of retirement, he is starting. He will not come out of retirement to compete in a training camp. He would take every single rep from day one. He is wearing a C on his jersey. He is the guy. From the start to whenever he is done here, there is no competition. That means it doesn't mean they're done. It means that McCarthy is not their starting quarterback for 2026. You would not put yourself through that. You would not put yourself through the work, the physical strain. I don't know where he lives now, if he lives in California or whatever. I went to Fresno State. I don't know where he lives. Maybe he lives in Vegas. Wherever he lives, he's not moving to Minnesota for months and months and months away from his family or moving his family here or whatever to be a backup to a 23-year-old kid. It's not going to happen. So there's no competition. If they do something like that, then that means he's the starter. Carl warming up to Aaron Rodgers for a year. I don't know. I've been ice cold on the Aaron Rodgers idea the entire time. I think if Rodgers had come here, the same thing that happened to him with the Steelers would have happened to him here. He would have played okay. The offensive line struggles would have been an issue for him. He would have been okay. They would have maybe made the playoffs at 10 wins, and then it would have been quickly over. I mean, at least with someone like Derek Carr or Kyler Murray, there's a chance you go into a playoff game and the guy, has got it at least and make some plays. I mean, Aaron Rodgers didn't really seem willing to throw it over the middle of the field. When he was moving, it was feeble. I mean, he's just an older guy with an Achilles tear. That's a limited ceiling right there. Denny says, would love to see Zimmer with McCarthy as the quarterback. Could you imagine? I don't know. I don't know what that would have been like. Well, he wouldn't have done it. He would have brought back Darnold. With Zimmer, I think that's what would have happened. I think. Because I don't know that Zimmer would have trusted a young quarterback if he liked Darnold's leadership. That was something that I think Zimmer always was not high on with Kirk. But Darnold didn't have that issue with the locker room when Kirk first got there. He never really took the reins. And I think Zimmer wanted him to do that, and it didn't happen. So I think, and remember, they re-signed Kirk while Zimmer was the coach. They would have likely, if it was Rick and Zim, they would have, I'm almost guarantee you, stayed the safer path. This was about believing that Kevin O'Connell could coach him up. That's what a lot of this was about. For Kwesi, it was about the rookie quarterback contract. For KOC, it was about believing that he could coach up any quarterback, and was not able to do that. Let's see. Bunch of letters. Runner 87. Sorry if there's a name in there. Just want JJ McCarthy to take a leap forward this season to go from 33 to 15 in quarterback rating and efficiency. It's a big ask. I mean, let's go take a look. Let's go take a look. Who was 15th this year? Let's take a look. 15. Well, Kirk in his small sample size. This is a funny thing about the grading system. Because Patrick Mahomes had such a high turnover-worthy play rate, his PFF grade was maybe had the worst of his career. But I mean, okay, you got Mac Jones. All right, well, you could make that case. 12th was Jared Goff, but Mahomes is right there. Bo Nix. Man, it's not the craziest thing I've ever heard. It's not the craziest thing that would maybe ever happen if he got to 15th. It's possible. But the main part is you need to throw the ball to Justin Jefferson. And I don't know if that can happen right away. Should have signed Rodgers last offseason. I'm not convinced of that. Not convinced by his performance of that. Chris says we should trust Mond, who isn't connected to the NFL now. Well, Mond is saying before in 2023. Where's that tweet? Where is it? Mond said they wanted him in 2023. So Mond, when was he let go? Well, he was let go in 2022. So I don't know. I don't know how he knows that. But he's referring to in the past. That's what he's talking about, is 2023, not just like right now. Why her? You her? Please stop saying JJ has an arm. Velocity alone does not equal arm talent. Well, I was referring to his velocity. Yeah. I don't disagree with you. I mean, I think anticipation and accuracy are number one, always and forever. But arm strength, the actual strength, does matter. Velocity does matter, as you see from Darnold, who could throw the heck out of the ball, and Allen, and Mahomes. But Burrow is much more of a touch type of passer and an accuracy guy. So it doesn't always have to work that way. But I agree. I didn't say arm talent. I think I said he has an arm, strong enough arm. Does he have the accuracy? No. And can he get to a point that he could ever be top notch with that accuracy? That is a stretch. It's a tough sell. I think at very best, you'd be talking about erratic when we're discussing what his arm would be, because I'm just not sure how many years it would take to really lock that in. And when you watch a lot of quarterbacks, usually they come out of college and you could see the throwing ability, the accuracy, the touch, and all that. Whereas he didn't have that in college either. So you're now in year 3 in the NFL and it hasn't shown up yet, and it wasn't there in college. It's hard to believe that it's going to suddenly show itself. But in terms of, does he have the arm to throw the ball downfield, to push it downfield, to push it into tight windows? Yeah, no, he does. And I think I was referring to the tight window throws, like which take arm strength. Arm talent is definitely different. I agree with that. Denny says, JJ passes something in the eye test at times Ponder never did, deer in the headlights. That's what I mean. Like there is a bit of a baller nature that has not been reined in for McCarthy, and that matters too. Can you grow up in a year? And I don't mean an assault on his character at all, which, look, people say a lot of stuff. When we say maturity, everyone knows what we mean. You're not saying you're an immature human being or you're a bad person or I'm assaulting your character. We all know that. We're talking about, how did you act as the centerpiece of an NFL team that's worth $7 billion or whatever and has a bunch of star players on it and high expectations? And the answer was, you looked like you'd never done it before. That's all we mean. We're talking about that. And everybody with a rational brain stuck inside of their skull knows that, but you have to clarify sometimes. But to your point, though, he has shown some of those traits that you could circle and say, all right, here's where you could see the arm strength, not arm talent necessarily, arm strength. Here's where you could see him throw a touch pass that actually worked out. It's in there somewhere, but can you do it consistently? Here's where you could see athleticism. Is it Kyler Murray's level in his peak, or is it Lamar? No, it's not, but he can scramble and make a play, score a touchdown from 10 yards out, and he's willing to do it. And he has not reined that in either. And it's funny because as I was watching like the documentary on the 49ers, some of Steve Young's plays when he was a young quarterback kind of looked like it. Not saying he could be Steve Young, one of the most accurate quarterbacks ever, but the athleticism not really matching up with like when to use it correctly, which is intermittently, not, something went wrong and now I'm scrambling, now I'm trying to make a play, which was happening to McCarthy too much at times. Devin says, I think KOC is way more on the hot seat than anyone talks about. For me, everyone's on the hot seat in the NFL, except for Mike McDonald. I mean, I might say Andy Reid, but if they miss the playoffs 2 in a row, he might be. There's like 5 coaches who aren't one bad season away from being out. We learned that this year. This year, I think the NFL took another step into lunacy when it came to getting rid of coaches, to where they're just going to cycle in half the league every single year. So of course, I mean, when you've already fired someone off your regime, then the spotlight is on you. I don't think that's hot seat is just such a, like, I don't know, like a really aggressive way to put it. It sounds like he's going to be fired tomorrow, but it's much more of a, like, we all know this. We all know 2026 is an enormous year for Kevin O'Connell. Derek says, I am at the point where I think a total teardown is necessary, including ownership. Nah, I don't think that. I don't think you need an ownership change. I think a total teardown does not make any sense right now, but next year, if this doesn't go right, then it will. And a few of you have sent me this tool that someone created that allows you to kind of play general manager. And it's a really cool interface, and you can restructure contracts and do the draft and free agency. I will be doing an episode with that. I was thinking about that for today. I was working on the mailbag all day and just didn't get there. So I want to do an episode with that where I try to play general manager and rebuild the Vikings for this year. But with the way that they're going to have to manage the cap, with the ages of a lot of their key players, it's really 2026 and maybe 2027 where they could keep this thing together. But after that, they will have to go through a refresh, as you usually have to do in this type of position. Didn't Ponder win a playoff game? No, he did not. Sadly, Ponder played his best football game ever against the Green Bay Packers to get them in the playoffs. That's probably what you're remembering. And then got hurt, and Joe Webb had to start the playoff game. And it did not go well, my friend. It did not go well. Such as Minnesota Vikings history, having an interesting young quarterback, or at least at that time, I think Ponder was still considered maybe mildly intriguing, and then they get hurt. That was mostly Adrian Peterson, though, just being insane. The FanDuel question of the day, if you missed it, is how about early MVP next year? Who's your Sam Darnold? I know Darnold didn't win the MVP, but Drake May did, and I don't know what his odds were going into last year, but it couldn't have been great. So if he was somewhat of a long shot for MVP, who's your long shot MVP for this year? I have Jaden Daniels at plus 2,000 as, hey, the league forgot how great Jaden Daniels is because he was hurt, but he's going to be good. And I also think they made a nice OC hire with David Blau. I've liked what I've heard from him early on. That is my pick. Caleb says, I think people saying that KOC isn't a QB guru because of last year is insane. He would get a lot out of Kyler, Carr, Jones, let JJ learn for another year. Maybe he hits or they missed and we move on. I tend to agree with you that we can't look at, all right, so just for example, Kyle Shanahan worked with the Cleveland Browns, didn't have any great elite quarterbacks there, then went to Atlanta, and that's how he ended up as a head coach, is Matt Ryan won MVP. Then he goes out to San Francisco. Jimmy G looks really good. Then he gets hurt. Then it's Nick Mullins, who we love, but they win 4 games, get Nick Bosa. Did that help? And then Jimmy G comes back. They go to the Super Bowl. Then Brock Purdy goes to the Super Bowl, but in between they draft a quarterback who couldn't play. Is he a quarterback whisperer or not? Well, the person who's playing quarterback has to be able to make the throws. And that was the point I made the other day about the completion percentage over expected. The expected completion percentage was the same between Darnold and McCarthy, but Darnold just way outperformed it and McCarthy way underperformed it. And that's based on how open your wide receivers are with the separation. I mean, the only thing you could do is draw up the plays and call them. You can't throw the ball for them. And I think what you're talking about with those guys, with Kyler, with Carr, probably Mac Jones too, is that those guys can throw the ball and are experienced. I think that experience does matter in this system, but I also think that it is about pressure too. And McCarthy, I mean, I know that he talked about a bunch of times how like the pressure wasn't getting to him and whatever else. And I think it did. I think it definitely did, because I think that he's human. And I don't know what human being would go through last year and through the entire time be like, yep, it's great. It wasn't great. There's a lot of stops and starts, a lot of frustrating, tough moments. And if he makes it through that, then I think that it will say a lot about him. But it's hard. It was very hard mentally. And I think that was a part of the reason that you would probably want to bring in a starter, because what's different from last year to this year? Only the whole world is making fun of you for the guy you let go winning the Super Bowl. That's really the only difference. Devin says getting too desperate for a quarterback is bad. All these quarterbacks are mid and there's like 10 of them. So what's to do then? What's to do? It's saddle yourself to someone who might not be able to make it. I mean, let's just be honest about the history of the NFL draft, right? We try to be honest about the draft here on the show. When there's 5 quarterbacks drafted in a class, someone won't make it. When there's 3 quarterbacks, probably one of the 3 won't make it. it's very, very rare that you get into a 2021 situation where they all turned out to be at least good, at least worth the draft pick. Or 2020. Yeah, 2020, right? That was Burrow, Tua, Herbert, Love, and Hurts. That's very rare because the very next year is Justin Fields, Mac Jones, Trey Lance. Like, quarterbacks sometimes don't work out. And every fan base where it didn't work out, they grab onto certain things and they hope and they dream and maybe it'll happen, and don't go out and get another quarterback because we got to give our guy that much time. But sometimes it doesn't work out. And McCarthy might still, but it wouldn't be unusual at all if he didn't. It would be, in fact, very usual for the NFL that a drafted quarterback just had it gotten to go wrong and it didn't work out. And you have to be desperate for a quarterback right now. You have to. You have to get Jefferson the ball. You've got to get back to the playoffs. I will continue to believe that this roster is very good and can be added to. And why would you waste it? Tom, that's the same thing we were talking about earlier about McCarthy's win-loss record. He 6-4. Like, come on, man. I mean, why even? Like, what does this do for anyone? Like, that's not a very telling statistic. That someone who ranked 42nd out of 45 quarterbacks in quarterback rating going 6-4 doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot. I mean, Drew Lock went like 5-1 with the Denver Broncos and they never turned into anything. I mean, there's a million quarterbacks who did that. It's 6-4 and he didn't even finish 2 of the games. It's more like 5-4. I just don't know what to do with that. Like, you have eyeballs, you know what happened. We can all work with the same set of facts here that it was a very, very bad season. One of the worst quarterback seasons in the league by JJ McCarthy. And he's put them in a position where we're talking about Derek Carr. And no one has denied when they've talked that they're going to look at other quarterbacks. In fact, the head coach announced it. The head coach announced at the end of the season, we're looking for other quarterbacks. I mean, he said a highly competitive quarterback room, not JJ's our guy. So we don't have to like gaslight. I mean, that's just 6-4 is not even any. I mean, it's not like he was 8-1. I mean, it's 6-4. Like, he's 500. That's okay. Like, anyway, Jared Allen suggested Tua for the Vikings. It's a little bit of a problem with that. It's that Brian Flores works here. Don't think Tua would be so happy to come to Minnesota. I also don't see any point in that. I mean, he could throw with anticipation and accuracy from the pocket, but his limitations, and also whoever gets Tua, you're taking your life in your hands with that guy. I mean, he's had so many injuries, so many concussions. I mean, we just went through that with Ryan Kelly. I don't think anybody should do that. I think he should be a backup quarterback. He played like a backup quarterback for like the last 2 years. Ron says Ben Lieber or Chad Greenway would be excellent if they were involved in some way. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I know Lieber. I like a lot of his football opinions and his analysis and breakdowns. I haven't heard a lot of Chad Greenway talk about the team, but that sort of sounds like you're just like sort of plucking guys, being like, I don't know, he seems cool. I mean, Anthony Barr is a really smart player, but I don't know about like running a franchise. Harrison Smith, like, should we just make a president of football something? In fact, like, doing it for Matt Ryan is kind of crazy to begin with, but Atlanta's crazy. But putting Rob Brzezinski as president of operations and then having a GM report to him, now that's not crazy. That actually sounds like a good idea. Now, NTVREZ Runner says Carr doesn't take you to the Super Bowl. This is what you told me last year about Sam Darnold. When I said, hey, maybe they should just bring back Sam Darnold, and, it was like, he's not going to get you to the Super Bowl. Oh, okay. Well, you got somebody to the Super Bowl. Look, it's not true that any old whoever can make the Super Bowl whenever. But if you look at what happened with Seattle or what happened with Philadelphia And the paths that those teams took to get to the Super Bowl, or even New England. Think about New England. So the Vikings next year are not going to be a perfect team. I think Seattle's as close to a perfect team as you could find. So let's say New England is not a perfect football team. Or Chicago. New England needed Justin Herbert to come out to New England from the West Coast with no offensive line and do his Justin Herbert thing. Then they got to play a backup quarterback. Think about the 2022 Eagles. They got to face Daniel Jones and the Giants, who were not that good. And then Brock Purdy tears his arm, and you're in the Super Bowl. I mean, if you get into the playoffs, you have a chance. And you need a hot defense, and you need the right pairings. And are you going to tell me, like, think about this alternate reality. Are you going to tell me the Vikings had no chance, like at the 2024 Super Bowl, if I told you they got to play at US Bank Stadium and start with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? I mean, then you would have said, well, yeah, they could have beat them. Well, that's my point. It's like that is something that could have happened under the right circumstances. If Detroit hadn't won 15 and you end up, getting usually 14 gets you home field. 14 got Seattle home field. So in a different world, these things can happen. This is what my point about, when people had said, oh, well, the Vikings would have won it with Sam Darnold anyway. Like, you don't even know who they would have played or how it would have played out. But my thing was, would you like a lottery ticket where you have a 10% chance to win $1 million, or would you like nothing? I mean, I think I'm going to take the lottery ticket. I think that doesn't mean there's no chance they could get to the playoffs with JJ McCarthy if he was the starter. That is possible. But, saying that about Derek Carr or whoever, it's like, I mean, if you have a quarterback who could throw for 30 touchdowns and 4,000 yards and get you to 11 wins, at least you're going to have a lottery ticket. That's better than nothing. For this year. And would it have been a lot better if JJ McCarthy was great and you could build the best possible team around his rookie contract? Oh, hell yeah, it would have been. But that's not the reality we're living in. Denny, Kirk finally becoming elite as a broadcaster would be a fitting career arc. Look, Kirk knows the league inside and out, and he has a big personality. I'm sure you've seen the videos of him like singing as a high schooler. I mean, even at the podium, like there were times where I interviewed Kirk, and of course, it's just funny. I don't know. I shouldn't even bring it up, but when people, you hate Kirk or whatever, it's like, okay, well, you might want to read my one-on-one article that I did with him in 2023, where, we talked about his hometown newspaper and he was great and everything. It's like, you can criticize a player and respect them. It's what I do. But anyway, when I had that conversation with him or other conversations along the way, in the locker room or wherever else, you just got the real sense that he was so dialed into the league. And I think that that's a thing that a lot of players who leave are not. And even when you listen to guys on TV, some of the ex-players, you're like, did you watch any of the games? Like, did you just scroll Twitter and then like go on television and just kind of like spout? I mean, this goes for a little bit of Cam Newton sometimes, and then Cam will then do some breakdown that's amazing, but then he'll go on TV and spout some crazy hot take that I'm like, Cam, did you watch this guy play that you're talking about at all? And that happens with a lot of different analysts over the years with their hot takes or analysis, where you just think, I'm not sure this guy's paying attention. And so when Kirk gives really informed takes, if he were a broadcaster, he's going to watch every single game. That he's going to be a perfectionist and want to go out there on TV and be super prepared for every single subject. I honestly think he would be as good as anybody on TV. I think he'd be absolutely terrific. Raymond, Kyler would be entertaining running around. I think that's true. Matt says, I can see it with Carr, but I got to squint pretty hard. That's a great way to put it. Yeah, I think we could all see it with Carr. He's been to the playoffs before. He has worked the ball to a number one receiver before. He's had good seasons before. And it's not that long ago that he did these things, just 2024. I mean, you could see it all with Carr. What is hard to see is like it being consistent, because that was always his issue, is in a Kirkian type of way. It would be a hot month. It would be a cold month. He starts out so hot in 2023 and then he's got some rough patches. That's always going to be who he is. You got to be able to smooth those out with your defense. You got to be able to smooth those out with your running game. And that was something, look, if there's one thing that KOC said that really resonated with me, and I hope he was, being really genuine about this, and he thinks about it every day going forward. I can't remember who asked or what the question was about adjusting the offense or what he's learned. And him saying that, he learned that sometimes from that Christmas Day game, you just have to grind out a win. Like you just can't keep going back to stuff that you had on your play sheet that you really wanted to do. You just have to fight tooth and nail and sometimes win the game with your punter. And that's what they did that day on Christmas. And if you can do that a little bit better, because that would have been my one thing with him that always stood out to me with the play calling, was sometimes you just have to grind the other team into a pulp rather than trying to always dagger them with the long 3rd and 1 play action or something. And he did that. Napster, where are you taking the wife for dinner for Valentine's Day? The wife and I have never celebrated a Valentine's Day. It's never happened. And one of the reasons is because she's often out of town during this time, broadcasting basketball, or in this case, broadcasting curling at the Olympics. So I don't even know, like, is today Valentine's Day? What day is it? I truly don't even know. Like, I've never circled it on the calendar. We've never celebrated it. I don't know. I celebrate my love every day, guys. Dave says Matt was also telling us how great JJ looked in camp and preseason. Well, I mean, preseason he played like one series this year. Did you see the preseason game in 2024? He looked pretty good. Now, if you think old Matt's wrong about that, what did the Vikings do based on his training camp? They made him the starting quarterback this year and let Sam Darnold go. I wasn't telling you the wrong information, my friends. And then this year's training camp was, now I did a live show every day. Came back in here just like pouring sweat, sunscreen in my eyes. Guys, he was 22 for 33 today, I will say that training camp is only practice. And Allen Iverson, a great philosopher, once said, not a game. It's not a game. It's just practice. And they can't hit you. And that's very different from in practice, because Atlanta hit JJ McCarthy and Green Bay hit JJ McCarthy. And in practice, they did not. That was a big difference. But after the joint practices, I mean, I remember go listen to New England's podcasts, because, I'm friends with some of those guys. Chad Graff, Doug Kyde's a great guy. And I listened to their podcasts after the joint practices, and they were like, yeah, I mean, JJ McCarthy was really sharp and looked really good. Go watch Kevin O'Connell at the podium talk about McCarthy after the joint practice. Look at how pleased he is. It doesn't guarantee anything. I can only tell you what's happening out there. I mean, that's all I can really do. He did look good. He did look good in the joint practice and had quite a few good practices this year. And I thought coming out of that it was probably going to work. And I had them at 11 wins. They got to 9. So it wasn't like a million miles away, but did I know he was going to get hurt in week 2 and miss 5 weeks and then totally reset the clock again? I did not. And I think that made it really difficult on him. But I also thought that he would be more accurate. He wasn't amazingly accurate in practice, but it was better. And you would hear players talk about it, coaches talk about it, like he's getting it in practice, but the game is just a different story because the defenses are so complicated that it happens so fast. There's no truly emulating game speed. It's just a different story. I can only tell you what's going on out there. Did you want him to like be having good practices and me say that is bad? Because that wouldn't have been true. It wasn't bad. It didn't blow my socks off. It wasn't as good as Darnold's and it wasn't as good as Bradford, but that was actually one of the hardest parts because Darnold and Bradford had played in the NFL before. So I had a certain expectation for their training camps. And then I was like, oh, wow, they actually, were over that expectation. But with McCarthy, I mean, he had only had the one taking second team reps the year before. So like, where do I even set the bar for a young quarterback? How do I know if this is going to project to the season? I can't say that it did. Devin also going with Jaden Daniels for that FanDuel question of the day. Lenny, JJ McCarthy at 12,500. Is that what it is? Is that what the odds actually are? Denny says going to say Burrow for MVP for the FanDuel question of the day, but for what team? Obviously Minnesota. KFT, if you think Kirk threw short too often, the new version of Kirk is even worse. 6.4 yards per attempt. Yeah, that's so when we look at Kirk's numbers, let's take a look here at his depth of target. I've tossed it out there. I think I memorized the stat. Was I right? Okay. It was 20% was behind the line of scrimmage. I think I said 40. That was that. I knew that was too much. 20% though, 1 out of every 5 being behind the line of scrimmage, and 62% of his throws did not even travel 10 yards. I mean, that's a lot of short passing right there. That is a lot of short passing. So he was not pushing it down the field very much. Denny says, I wonder if Zim and Incognito ever reconciled. Have you known Zim to ever reconcile? I'm not sure that that's really in his DNA. Young cringe gamer, can you ever trust what Kellen Mond says? Is Kellen Mond credible? I mean, I haven't. I've talked to Kellen Mond when he was with the Vikings. I think most people thought he was a good dude. Like, I don't know. He has no reason, I don't think, to make it up. He's not doing content. He's not pumping a YouTube. He's not trying to get an analyst job. I think he's doing some sort of business or real estate or something like that. That was what was on his LinkedIn. I think he's probably now separated enough from it that feels like he could sort of throw some stuff out there because he's out of the league and I think is given up on the dream. And that's why he's just sort of, hey, I'm out here and I'll just throw something out there that I know. But I wouldn't say that he's like not a reliable source. I mean, maybe he is. I don't know. It's Kellen Mond. It's hard to say. But I did think it was an opening to, and I believe it based on the situation that would have been something considered. Now, how closely that ever got, that we don't really know. Palm Pine Aussies with the super chat. Thank you very much. Derek Carr, comeback player of the year. Could happen. Kit says Carr and McCarthy would be a generational memeable quarterback room. Guy liner. Yeah. I think that's the shadows, right? That's all that is with his helmet. It just creates a shadow on his eyes. I think that's what that is for Derek Carr. I'm pretty sure that's it. Runner 87 would trust Flores on not playing Ivan Pace Jr. Yeah, that clearly just fell out of favor. And I think it had a lot to do with Harrison Phillips and Jonathan Bullard that, when those guys were creating lanes for him to just run and tackle, he could do it. But when he had to fight through linemen, it was harder. I finally got to the point where you guys are explaining the forest and the trees thing. Yeah, sometimes I lose the metaphor a little bit there. Sorry about that. Cause and effect out of your quarterback options, what each of their records would be at the end of next season and who could pick up KOC's offense the quickest. So you mean if I were guessing, like out of all the quarterback options, like how would they finish? How would the Vikings finish? Let's say that all of them play 17 games and it works out the best it possibly can. Because we could do it that way, or we could do like a median outcome. But let's say like best case scenario, I think you can win 11 or 12 with Kyler and seriously go into a playoff game with the other team being like, this is going to be hard. With Derek Carr, it's more like 10 to me, where he can have 4,000 yards, good season, but there's going to be those games that you're left disappointed and enough to make the playoffs. Mac Jones is probably in that same ballpark, 9 to 10 wins, and you're competing on the last day for a playoff spot. I mean, Malik Willis, I have no idea. If it clicked and all the stuff you saw with Green Bay was consistent, and I mean, he could be amazing, but I don't know if that's going to happen from a week-to-week basis for him to be amazing. So I don't even know where to put that one. Kirk, I've got 8, obviously, right? 8. I mean, you're probably going to get some reasonable quarterback play early in the season, but I just don't know if he could play 17 games and be good the whole way. Aaron Rodgers, I'd probably go 10. I think you probably get to 10 with Rodgers, and then you just get blasted in the first round of the playoffs. Kyler's the only one you could go into the playoffs in the best case scenario, and somebody on the other side's being like, man, that dude's balling. Because he is still capable of balling. I mean, I go back to this game that he played against the Rams last year. It's preposterous in 2024. Just ridiculous. 6 big time throws, 41 points. That's in there. Those games are in there. Gazinkad, Carr can be good because you either get a good year from him and JJ gets to learn, or JJ improves enough and beats out Carr. Yeah, I don't think he's beating out Carr, but there's another scenario where he improves and Carr gets hurt. And so let's say Carr plays the first 7 games of the year and then gets hurt, and JJ comes in halfway through, but is improved enough to the point where he could take him the rest of the way. That's a scenario. Daver says, this is the catch-22. The kid isn't good because he hasn't played, but he can't get better if he doesn't play. So that second part I don't think is true. And there's enough examples of that. Like, I mean, Sam Darnold cites his biggest career growth is when he didn't play. And how about like all the quarterbacks that have gotten some development over the years and then finally got to start? The most recent is Jordan Love. Patrick Mahomes not starting his first year, but Jordan Love, I think, is especially similar because he's a guy that was very raw and not very accurate at first. And then he got there eventually. So, Denny says that he needs to play, but anyone who plans for that next year is taking a huge risk of getting fired. I think that practice stuff is practicing every single day and watching a pro quarterback go through a season from inside the quarterback room is great. Great. And playing 3 preseason games, play all 3 of them, start them, play the whole first half, if not more than that. Like get that development time and truly focus on development, not focus on, hey, you got to go beat the Green Bay Packers. That's much harder. Runner 87, in 2026, McCarthy will start 17 games. We get fool's gold and sign him to an extension. Well, would they sign? I guess they could after the 3rd year, or he regresses and we're 6-12. See, that's one thing that I don't agree with, because as it's been presented by some people who want to stick with McCarthy, it's like these 2 extremes. But I don't know if the 2 extremes are the most likely outcome for McCarthy. The most likely outcome to me is that he does make progress, but it's not enough to get you over the hump. I don't think it's a true 2 outcome situation. I think the median outcome would be, it'd be like a bell curve where there's like a 90% chance that this is just okay, and maybe a 10% chance that it's absolutely horrible, and a 10% chance, no, it doesn't work that, 5% chance, get my bell curve / pie chart wrong. It's like a 5% chance it's amazing, and a 5% chance it's absolutely horrible, which would be the best possible outcomes, but those are also the least likely. The most likely is in there in the middle. Have to wait a long time for football. That's true. Denny, did it ever look like JJ became shaken by what happened this year? He seemed to be handling things okay, but I may be wrong. I think he tried very hard to put on a brave face and to say, I'm confident, all that sort of stuff. But I think that after the Lions game, he's very confident, very back up. And I thought the attitude and everything was very strong after getting that win. But you could see the toll as it went along with McCarthy. And he's a guy that always wants to present positivity. He always wants to present confidence when he's talking in front of us and everything else. But there's just no way. And where I thought was actually more kind of in the play during that stretch before he missed the Seattle game, which is a good thing he did. But before he missed that, there was just a handful of plays where I thought, I think he's trying to guide the ball. I think he's trying to think way too much. You could see it wearing on him. You would see him walk to the sideline after a series and it just looked defeated. That's anybody who went through what he went through last year. And then there's some confidence picked up at the end of the season, but going through the hand injury, it just, man, it's like every time it started to get a little momentum, there was some sort of setback. And it's been more than 20 years without a franchise quarterback is getting old, KFT. I know. And it is the same old type of thing where it's talking about somebody else's quarterback, maybe coming out of retirement, hoping to get to the playoffs. And I could see where that's really exhausting when everyone had gotten so excited about JJ McCarthy being their guy. And this was something that we talked about a lot leading into the season. Like, this could be different. This could be the time. This could be the guy like that you finally land on and change the trajectory of this. Maybe it turned out that the guy had already been here in Sam Darnold, but not much you could do about that. There was reason to think that McCarthy could be that guy. There was reason to think that with the way that he had carried himself in 24, the training camp, the way that he had even played toward the end of training camp this year, there was reason to think that it could be there. That's why I'm not saying that they should give up. I think the best path is just to take a year behind the scenes and then see where you're at after that. Lenny says the Seahawks ran way more, not a little more. What I said was efficiency. Their efficiency was only a little bit better than the Vikings in 2024, believe it or not. Their yards per carry was not that good. Their expected points added was not that good. They did run it a lot. They also led a lot of games and they had an unbelievable defense. So they had, like, look at the Vikings game. They ran the whole game. Why wouldn't you? You were ahead and the other team had no chance whatsoever of coming back. They were in quite a few of those games where the handoffs are running out the clock. Now, in some tight situations, they ran more than the Vikings in 2024 because the Vikings didn't have an explosive run game and they lost Christian Darrisaw. Aaron Jones was averaging 5 yards a carry when Darrisaw got hurt. That was a big deal. But Seattle's offense in their passing game was remarkably similar to the Vikings in 2024. That was the point. Bimmy says Malik Willis is the best option. I mean, Malik Willis is the more likely to have the true outcomes for the options. I agree with that. He is more likely either click and be awesome or be a total calamity. What I do like about Malik Willis is the maturity that he displayed as Jordan Love's backup. We've seen backups come into games and not look prepared at all, and he always did. That impressed me a lot. He looked like he was in command of an offense. That was impressive. Would you trade McCarthy for Penix straight up? The injuries for both. I don't know. Penix is a lot older. His organization is bad. I think in KOC's offense, Penix works out better though, doesn't he? Stand there and let it fire down the field. I don't know really what they were trying to do with his offense in Atlanta. The big time throws from him though, the tight windows where anticipation, like he's got that. I think he's a better fit for the offense. I wonder if they would have drafted him instead of McCarthy if he was on the board and if he would have fit better than he did in Atlanta, but I don't know. I mean, both of those guys with the ACL, another ACL is just so scary for Michael Penix. That's the dings and cuts of JJ McCarthy or a meniscus that's fully repaired. That's less scary than a guy who's had a bunch of ACLs. Son of Beavers, Ryan Tannehill is still out there just saying. Yeah. I mean, maybe he wants to go. Last year, there was a report I saw somewhere that he would come back if he was going to be a starter. And everyone's like, no. Young Cringe, why are we making comps to players? Comps never work. Oh, it's back. Okay. Sorry, just cut out for a second. Yeah, comps are fun. Yeah, comps are fun. I like doing comparisons because I think what comparisons do for you sometimes is they give you kind of like a new way of looking at something. That's how I like to think of it. Oops. They give you a new way of thinking of something. Like, let me put someone in perspective. So one of the things that I love using is that Hall of Fame monitor, for example. Maybe I could show this, guys. Have you ever used the Hall of Fame monitor? Let me see if I could show this to you if Pro Football Reference doesn't melt down my computer. It has the tendency type. We'll see if we can find it. It is a huge website. I am human, verify. I love using, so like, let's go, because I don't know where to find this. Let's go to Kirk Cousins' page and scroll to the bottom. Where is the okay, so here's the Hall of Fame monitor right here. And if we go, that's the explanation for the Hall of Fame monitor here. And we try to boot out all the autoplay videos. You can hear my computer screaming. And we look at, like, so here's the Hall of Fame monitor. And here's all of the quarterbacks and how they score. And this is kind of created based on history and different numbers that have resulted in guys making the Hall of Fame and how likely they are. So if we're going to look for like Kirk Cousins, how likely is he make the Hall of Fame? Well, it's not that likely that Cousins makes the Hall of Fame. And his comparisons for his career are Jared Goff, Dak Prescott. I don't really see it with Vinny Testaverde, but who else? Derek Carr. Hey, not that far away from Kirk Cousins. And then Tony Romo, Alex Smith, Mark Brunell. You got a Brad Johnson mixed in, Jeff Garcia. So I like to do stuff like that. That's kind of looking at, comparative type of things where we can go, hey, like what kind of quarterback could JJ McCarthy be based on what we know right now? And what is the answer to that? And Ryan Tannehill is the one that comes to mind for me over and over. Like, Ryan Tannehill was not very accurate, was a really good athlete, was probably in over his head starting early in his career, and it eventually ended up working out for him. But it didn't work out right away. Let's see. De'Aaron Morris says, Raiders fan, hope you get Derek. He's my GOAT and a good quarterback who's smart, accurate, tough, top 12 to 15 when he's healthy. Okay, there's a Raiders perspective. I thought that Carr was liked by Raiders fans. He's certainly made them more competitive than they have been since. He's in Bakersfield, California. Okay. I figured he was in California, that's where he was doing his podcast. I mean, bottom line is I don't think it's a bad idea. And I could see it working for what they need to accomplish. And I could see him being welcomed by the locker room as a veteran quarterback who knows how to get it done, knows how to get to the playoffs, knows how to throw for 30 touchdowns, knows how to lead an offense. And I think the happiest person would be Justin Jefferson to see someone who could throw a really nice ball. Lenny, do you think Drake May was a Super Bowl caliber quarterback this year? He almost won the MVP. I'm going to go with yes. I mean, huh? Yeah, I'm going to go with yes. Just because it didn't go right in the Super Bowl does not mean he was not a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. Corey's warming up to the Kyler idea. Definitely the kind of guy that has to get out of the pocket to make plays. How well does that fit? That's the surprising thing from 2024 is that he was under center a quarter of the time, ran play action a high percentage of the time and had success with it. I think he was in the top 5 in 2024 in play action yardage. So that to me said that Drew Petzing, when he was the offensive coordinator there, that he did a lot of KOC type of stuff. And, we know that KOC likes to put his quarterback under center, bigger personnel, and would roll him out sometimes. If he's good with that, then he can do it. Some of the over the middle passing might be problematic for Kyler Murray. And I think that's part of the inconsistency of Murray is that throwing over the middle can be a challenge for him. The height thing is real. Denny Zimmer would have loved Darnold. I think Darnold's a Zimmer guy. He's just so football. He's just like Darnold is all about football. He's an uncomplicated, Like, just go out there and play for the guys. Like, people are really seeing this. The more he does interviews, you're like, this is him. This is who he is. There's not some deep, dark layer to Sam Darnold. I think he's a straightforward type of person that is uncomplicated, undramatic, and leads the guys the way he's supposed to lead them. Guys buy into him. Yeah, you would have, I mean, Wes Phillips said it. He's a guy's guy kind of guy. And I think Zimmer would have liked that. Bredovics. I think the crappy thing is I don't want KOC to try to save his job for 1 year. Just play McCarthy. And if he sucks, then I assume you mean 2027 draft is rich. It sounds good in theory, but was last year any fun for you? It's when you have all those good players and you just can't get any good quarterback play, which is obviously on the table as a potential option for something that could happen, decent percentage. Like, is that it was just unwatchable at times. And I don't know how you can ask KOC to do that. I don't know how you can ask any of them to do it. Lenny Allen's a bad comparison for McCarthy. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. No, but you've got the other part of that wrong. McCarthy was better in his first year than Allen. Like, no, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. It's a bad comparison because Allen is 6'6" and 240 pounds and just way, way more physically gifted. And it took him 900 passes before he figured it out. So, like, it's not even really similar at all. Those two. Lenny McCarthy's not as bad as Coller makes him out to be. I mean, look, Lenny, there's nothing I can do about the facts, man. There's nothing I can do about the facts. The facts are what they are. And my approach is always going to be the facts. Like, we could start with whatever you want to start with. If it's PFF grade, JJ McCarthy was 36th out of 44. If it's quarterback rating, which, some people will dismiss, but look at the top quarterbacks, the two guys in the MVP race, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and he's, 42nd right down there with Jake Browning, Tyrod Taylor, Shadur Sanders. I can't do anything about that. I just can't. Like, I can't change that. It is what it is. The bad throw percentage being the same as Nick Mullins, I just can't change it for you. It would be nice if I could, but just can't. Nikki, is Derek Carr a JJ comparison, or do you think, competition? No, yeah, I don't think so. I don't think it's a competition. No, otherwise he'd stay retired. Todd, in your opinion, does Anthony Richardson have a chance to be a good quarterback, or is he washed up? He does, but there's another guy who was thrown into the fire just too early. And how much did he take away from this last year of sitting behind Daniel Jones and Phillip Rivers and seeing those guys operate? The issue with Anthony Richardson, somehow he got hurt when he wasn't even playing, is that he also got hurt so much he didn't have a chance to develop throwing the football, and the short stuff was so bad. The deep stuff was pretty good and sometimes really impressive, but the short stuff was so bad. He really wasn't playing on time and rhythm. I don't think he's a real option. He feels like a someday guy, like someday shows up with some other team at age 29 and maybe starts a season. I don't know. It's so hard when guys can't throw the ball. And this is the challenge with McCarthy. The degree of which you have to throw accurately in the NFL to be a starting quarterback that's successful is so high. That bar is so high. I don't know of any of the top quarterbacks that are as inaccurate as someone as Anthony Richardson. Even guys who are running quarterbacks have to be more accurate than that. You might have been able to get away with it in Vince Young's era or Michael Vick, but Michael Vick now would have had to throw more accurately, or there would have been talk of you can't really play him because you could throw for 2,500 yards and get in the playoffs back then. I don't think you could do that now. High Boy says 49ers are keeping Mac Jones. The 49ers are telling people they're keeping Mac Jones so they could get a better offer, I think. High Boy would take Murray over Tua. Tua just to me is not an option. Just not an option. Just, you're not going to go get that guy when Brian Flores now wields some significant power. Social or dirty? Is that what that says? Am I crazy for thinking Mariota is the best available option outside of a trade? He's better than Kirk and Geno at this point. I don't know if he's better. I mean, Geno had a terrible year. I don't know if he's better than Geno because 2 years ago, Geno was one of the best deep passers in the league. Mariota had good numbers throwing down the field. He's just perpetually disappointing. He flashes to you and has good games here or there when he gets to start, and then it fades with him. And I think he's never really seen the field that well, but he's got the arm, he's got some mobility. If Mariota comes in, then the door is open to McCarthy. I've been looking at only options where McCarthy is not the starter. But if you want to talk about, maybe we'll have a whole show on this sometime, or, more time on it at some point. But there are a number of guys who would just be regular competition for him. And is there good options there? Mariota by far the best option. Okay, it's pronounced native res runner. Okay, now I see it. NTV native. Okay, all right. My bad. Trying to read on the fly, it kind of looks like a bunch of letters and then runner 87. But I appreciate you stopping by. Appreciate you asking questions, throwing comments in the chat. I appreciate all of you guys for doing that. I mean, think about this. We don't have a football game for a long time. We probably don't have a transaction for a little while. And we got a big crowd here talking football tonight. I love that about you guys. You guys are as psychotic about football as I am, and I appreciate that. So thank you, Native Res Runner 87, and everyone else who has stopped by. So your most recent comment is, I don't know if Carr takes the Vikings to the Super Bowl. Things can happen for sure. Still bitter that they let him go like a lot of us are with, Darnold. Yeah, that's the thing, though, is if you go back to how you felt about Sam Darnold, it's really proof that you just don't really know. The one thing that we know is that it's going to take a certain skill set for it to work. And that skill set is accuracy. It's someone who can throw with timing. It's someone who can have anticipation, someone who knows how to run every bit of an offense inside out. And Carr does check those boxes. JW, is there any reasonable chance ownership sees this year as a year to tank, not being in quarterback who could guide them to 500? Next year's class might be worthwhile. This ownership is never going to tank, and certainly not this year, because this is all the guys still that they spent all the money on. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars on this group. They're not going to say, all right, let's tear it all apart. Let's go to the bottom. Not now. If they don't do it after this year, if this year is a failure and they don't do it after this year, then I don't know what to tell you then, because that would be the exact perfect time to do it. Young cringe gamer. It's ironic that Kirk's best football was with Kubiak. Why did the Vikings kick Kubiak out the door? Well, they hired KOC the next year. And Kubiak went to New Orleans. Or no, Kubiak went to San Francisco. And I think that was the connection. Yeah, that was the connection with Darnold. Is Kubiak went to San Francisco and worked there for Kyle Shanahan and then worked with Sam Darnold. But they hired KOC, brought in, his offense, his guys. And that's why Kubiak went there. But when you look at their coaching staff, it's a lot of guys who worked for the Vikings. Andrew Janocko, Kennedy Palomalu, Rick Dennison. There's others. I mean, it was a good coaching staff. It was a good offensive performance in 2021. They had a good offense. It wasn't great, but it was good. The game that Kirk played in 2021 against the Packers and Jefferson, holy cow. Go watch that. This is how, like, when you're grasping at straws, being like, well, he was 6-4 and, in the last couple games, go watch that game and think about how Kirk often came up short. And look how well he plays in that game. He is amazing. And that's still a guy who left you wanting more. But the unfortunate part about Cousins and the offense was that the offense peaked in 2020 and 2021, and the defense completely collapsed. And in 19, the defense was still strong, but the offense wasn't quite there yet. And that's how it was. It was good. It was a good offense, but I think it could have been even better with Clint Kubiak in 2021, which I thought was their best version. And Clint also actually protected Kirk that year. He didn't take as many sacks. Devin, Price is a sticking point with these quarterbacks. Great point. Yep, great point. Because we're talking about how Carr would fit. But if they want a second round draft pick for him or something, no. If his cap hit is going to be 30 million, no. So it does matter. And with Kyler, the same thing. It does matter. Saturday is Valentine's Day. Okay. Everybody who celebrates Valentine's Day, I wish you the best for that day. My wife will not be in town. Son of Beaver's running on 3rd and 1. KOC just fainted. He's got to figure that out. That's for sure. That is for sure. All right. I think I got to, okay. That's funny. Epic Kenny Pickett. Oh, that's funny. So what I'm going to do, we made it to the bottom of the chat. I really appreciate that. What I'm going to do is, I don't know if I'm going to do another live one unless there's some news that comes out for this week, but we got some other pods coming. Did the show a little NFC North check-in with Nolan Bianchi, did a check-in with Lauren Cox, who covers the Chicago Bears. So we got a couple of those podcasts coming. The fantasy show came to the end. If you guys have seen that, it's always good football conversation on that one. PurpleInsider.football's got the mailbag. I'm thinking about like a Monday night where I'd use that GM tool and try to rebuild the Vikings through the GM tool for a Monday night live show. That's what I'm thinking, because I got a few things that I'll roll out, maybe an off-air one to answer some emailed questions people have sent me, and then we'll do that Monday night. We'll all play GMs together, and we could try to put together a good Minnesota Vikings offseason. But hey, you guys turned a Kellen Mond tweet into a couple of fun hours of football talk. So doesn't get much better than that. I really appreciate all of you guys coming on in and having a good chat, as so many of you do now on a nightly basis every time we go live. Can't thank you enough for that. It makes it really, really fun to have these conversations. And we'll see where it takes us. We'll see where the insider reports are. We'll do some more draft sims. And we'll try to figure out where this thing is going. Maybe we'll talk about some other teams and their outlooks. If you're watching this back, make sure you answer the FanDuel question of the day in the comments, which was, who's your long shot MVP? Drake May almost made it and was a long shot going into the season. Who would it be for you this year? I'm going Jaden Daniels. So, all right, we'll definitely talk again soon, everybody. Next time we stream. Also, just, keep an eye on the channel. New stuff being uploaded every day. And have a nice Valentine's Day when it comes along.